Hey everybody, my name is Mark Wessels. I'm the Director of Education for the Zildjian and Vic Firth companies. We also have Joe Testa, the Vice President of Artist Relations, and our featured guest, Valerie Naranjo. I am saying that right, aren't I?
Yes, you are.
First of all, congratulations for the Hall of Fame induction to P.A.S. Hall of Fame. We tried to hook up at P.A.S, but with schedules being as crazy as they weren't able to do it, but glad that you could be here.
Thank you so much. And yes, we did try to hook up. It's a busy place. And I'm grateful that we're hooking up now. Thanks for having me.
I want to talk about your family upbringing because you grew up in a very musical family.
Yes, my family is from Southern Colorado, and both sides have Native American background. The first recording I ever made, I was 5 years old, and one of my cousins had bought a new tape recorder. Remember those? And they said, "Here, sing into this." And so I sang something like, no, I don't have any instruments, but like, do ta shila, do ta shila, do ta shila, hey, yana. One of those kind of songs. Oh, and nice. That was my first recording session.
You still
didn't get any money for it. No royalties. No, just love from the family. My mother wanted to be a drummer. Her grandfather, because there were so many musicians in the family, she wanted to join the pack. He told her, though, here in Southern Colorado, the place that you're going to play is going to be the VFW Hall and Greco's Bar down the street and the American Legion. And he didn't think that was going to be set her up for a good, wholesome young lady's upbringing. So he said, "No, sorry, you can't do it." And you know what? She never actually told me this until probably 15 years after I started playing SNL. And I was shocked. I said, "Mom, why didn't you say anything when I was a child?" And she said, "I didn't want you to do anything because of me." So I really, I appreciate her very, her considerate nature.
Mom.
Yeah, that's what moms do. They take care of the kids.
Did you have a draw yourself, natural draw to the drums?
I definitely did. My father used to like to take us to other native nations. So we go to Arizona or we go to New Mexico. I grew up in Southern Colorado. He took us to Mexico. And that's where I heard the marimba, which is such a beloved instrument in Mexico, Oaxaca, southern states of Mexico, especially Guatemala and other places. And, the strange thing about it, I loved the timbre. Something about the timbre of that instrument really attracted me. I was not in love with the styles of music they were playing. So even when I was pretty young, I used to think, well, what if like Parliament Funkadelic or Earth, Wind and Fire or Santana or a West African rock band called Osibisa, I wonder what would happen if that music was played on a marimba. And when I actually met through a recording, the master gyil player Kakraba Lobi, I said, not only has it happened. This is what we draw from, this kind of playing. And it was really a big, light bulb on for me at that time. I was out of graduate school by that time.
Oh, but you had seen the gyil when you were undergrad, like right away. You studied with an ethnomusicologist?
Well, actually, John Gaume at the University of Colorado always had someone on the staff, a doctoral student or a graduate student, either from Brazil, West Africa, or the Caribbean, Cuba, Dominican Republic. The particular year I was there, it was Joseph from Ghana. And Joseph used to teach ewe drumming, which for me was that another one of those light bulb moments that if you can play the fugue in G minor and you can tear it all up, you can't necessarily play a groove and keep it.
Mhm.
And it was for me like being a little freshman out of a tiny town into Boulder, Colorado, and understanding that aspect of musicianship was great for me. The second thing that Joseph did would be to walk up to a chromatic marimba and play the most outrageous and beautiful stuff, and in a style and with a timbre, with a touch that I'd never heard anywhere before. So he said, well, I'm a clarinet player, I'm not a percussion player. I said, man, whatever you're playing is awesome. So that piqued my interest about the gyil.
But when you went to Oklahoma, you had kind of a dual major where you were doing vocal and instrumental at the same time.
Yeah, I love to sing. My voice is my first instrument. I love to teach. I teach at NYU now, and I love it. So I said, and one thing that, dumb luck, ignorance is bliss. I said, if I'm an education major, I can study cello and clarinet and trumpet and trombone. And that really attracted me because I felt at some point, whether I was teach or not, I'd want to know how to use at least a few instruments so that I could write for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the impetus behind my my first education degree.
My guess is, and what I find in a lot of cases is that the percussionists or drummers who have a good command of other instruments, or at least know how to play other instruments, seem to be a little bit, how do I say this? They seem to understand phrasing better and able to fit into a musical context a lot quicker. Is it especially?
I suppose this could be true. Absolutely. I know a lot of conductors who are percussionists, and they've gone into that. As an undergrad, my orchestral conductor said, instead of just counting to 105 and going, psh, why don't you look at the score? And that was some of the best advice I've ever had. And of course, then moving to New York and going to the Met and seeing that there were many students who had a score, I said, so I'm not the only one who knows about the score.
I thought it was really interesting, your path that, studying marimba and meeting Lee Howard Stevens, which, from your background and from what we all know about you, seems a little strange. So were you actually classically working on prelude and fugue and, all of the classical things?
David Maslanka, the Bach two-part inventions. As a freshman, the only thing I could think of, everything on my brain was timpani. I'm going to play timpani in a symphony orchestra. And, I loved studying timpani. It was really amazing. But all of the undergrad and a lot of the graduate studies were classical marimba. I did the graduate studies with Gordon Stout at a college. But the way I met Lee is he was a guest artist at the University of Oklahoma. I'd never seen anything like that. Oh my gosh, the independence, the meta dependence. And at the end of a week, I said, I'd really like to continue to study with you. And he was very generous. He said, well, I'm in Manhattan, come on over. I went for a 10-day stint my senior year. And then I ran into the loft scene in New York, where, was so, for me, it was so powerful because, the loft scene, meaning places like Soundscape, Verna Gillis's loft, just a big old place, perhaps bigger than this room, where people would go to after their gigs with no agenda. No one knew who was going to meet whom and what kind of music was going to happen. And, sometimes and what genre and, as an audience member, you paid a couple of bucks and got a little glass of wine in a plastic cup and we're able to enjoy all of this. So during my studies with Lee, I was exposed to all this. And I said, you know what? Got to move to New York. Got to move here.
Oh, wow. A life-changing experience.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I can't believe my parents allowed that. They were like, yeah, go have fun.
That's incredible.
Check in.
I was reading somewhere and I wanted to hear more of the story of how you ended up getting a gig at the Italian restaurant, and then working on like on the street, playing on the street and for tips and stuff, and how those things led to every next step for you in New York, because it's kind of like the first day too, like at the restaurant.
Well, my biggest fortune is literally about 12 hours after I drove into New York with a Musser M250 and some clothes and some essentials, I met my husband, Barry Olson, who's has, I mean, to this day, he helped me set up the sound on this call. He's just very, very generous and supportive, as well as being an amazing artist. And then one of the second fortunes was that, well, hey, I'm in New York, I better start making a living. I drove downtown to 34th Street. I said, okay, here's where I'm going to stop, make a right turn and start looking for a waitress job, because you got to make a living somehow. Second restaurant was called Foro Italico, small Italian restaurant. I walked in, said, I'm looking for a waitress job. And the proprietor said, well, that's not a go, but sit down. Who are you? I'm sure I had my Farrah Fawcett haircut and I was a little bit chubby. And, he probably thought this is someone from outer space, at least not a New Yorker. And he said, tell me a little bit about yourself. And in the conversation, I mentioned that I was a marimbist. And he said, oh, do you play that with other instruments? And I said, yes, you can, but that's not necessary. He said, I just let go of a classical guitarist who used to sit in that corner and play. Would you be willing to bring your instrument tonight? It's about 2:00 in the afternoon. I said, First I had to pick my jaw up from the floor, put it back on. I said, yes, I'd be very happy to do that. And so the summer between undergrad and grad school, I had a 5-night week gig.
You probably like, I don't know what everybody's talking about. It's not that hard in New York.
No, I'm
jobs
painfully...
are just falling out of Italian restaurants.
Jobs are just coming. No, I seem to be blessed with serendipity, and I'm very grateful for that.
As a classically trained marimba player going through college, wasn't it a little daunting? Sit up in the corner, play 5 hours tonight. I'm sure you went.
Fortunately, it was about 3.
Oh, okay.
Only 3.
Middle, and I needed the dinner because remember, I just moved to New York and everything's pretty expensive. There's an aspect of me that is, to this very day, gets very frightened and introverted about that far from the event. But by the time you're that far from the event, you don't have room for that. I did a thing last weekend in Miami, and I literally couldn't get the gyil to sound good. We shipped it and we had to take it apart. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to sound terrible. It's going to be the worst thing. Just, confidence issues. But I had those issues before. But, by the time the first people come into the restaurant, it's just about the music and about making them as comfortable as possible. One of the people who used to be a frequent, he literally was a bachelor who came 5 nights a week to have dinner. And, we struck up a friendship, and he said, towards the end of my summer, he said, have you ever thought of playing on the street? And I said, isn't that something for saxophonists and, people with little instruments? And he said, well, look, you brought the instrument here. I had a little Nova hatchback, really, really not a beat up car, but certainly not a new car, but it fit the marimba perfectly well. And so with his prodding, I went out. And of course, I played as if I was playing my senior recital. And fortunately for me, again, serendipity, a friend of my husband, Scott Peebles, happened to walk by. And he stopped and he smiled and he waved and he went. I saw him at my house about a week later, and he said, what you're doing is fine. It's really beautiful. It's all fine. You have to talk to the people. If you want to make money doing this, you have to connect. So that was one big step for me to break out of my, undergraduate student shell and just say, this is a Stevie Wonder piece. It was written 5 years ago, and it talks about so, and then then begin to engage with strangers.
But also the repertoire was not just, I mean, you were doing a lot of things that were just kind of popular and would get people's attention and entertain, right?
Anything that could get their attention that I could get my hands on. A lot of Stevie Wonder, a little bit of the Beatles. Bach was always seemed to be a hit because there were people who seemed to say, oh, that's very unusual, Bach on the marimba. I played some West African music because I, found some recordings. And of course, I was really, talking in a cloud. I didn't really know what I was talking about, but I said, this instrument comes from West Africa, and this is the kind of music you would hear. And anything that I could, rags, salsa.
2 questions.
Yes.
Did you have to get a permit? Because I think you do have to do that now. And then
you have to do it now, yeah.
And 2, did you make more money doing that than playing the restaurant?
Oh, second question. Absolutely. Once I started talking to people, then I realized, New Yorkers, we are, we have big hearts. I think there's this thing in public that we want to give each other space. But when you open the door for your space, man, it's a free for all, and it's a lot of fun. So I did make a good chunk of change a lot of times. And secondly, no, you did not need a permit. My favorite space was in front of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, whereas if you look at the front of that space, it's a natural outdoor theater.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's a natural performance space. I do remember once, though, there was a gentleman who lived on Fifth Avenue across the street, and he came down, he walked up to me. He was polite, he was firm. He said, my daughter's trying to study for whatever it was, and you're here. And I was ready to say, okay, no trouble, no trouble. And 3 men in suits came down from the audience and said, what are you doing? Look at her, she's giving us music. She's providing us with entertainment and culture. You got to put up, close your window.
She has the accent and everything. How'd you develop
Yeah,
that?
it was beautiful. And I was like, just kind of sitting there going, I wonder if a cop's going to come by in a second. But I've been really fortunate.
You started really going into studying the gyil and doing as much as you could in New York, right?
What happened is I went to study with Gordon Stout,
Mm-hmm.
and we are required to, as a graduate student in performance of any instrument, one is required at the college to take a course to understand the origins of your instrument.
That's cool.
You're going to be doing clinics, you're going to be doing workshops and things like that. So it was their way of saying, you need to be prepared. You need to know where the roots of your instrument are. And of course, in Gordon Stout's studio, there is a gazillion marimbas studying marimba. So I decided to study gyil as to be to bring more information to myself and to the studio. There was such a lack of information. So it was really during that year of graduate school, I said, if I really want to do this, I think I'm going to take a journey. It took me several years, from the age of 23 to the age of 29 to garner the courage to go, because I'd heard about disease and I'd heard about, lack of infrastructure. And meanwhile, I did a lot of research here. And fortunately, the African, the Schomburg Center for African Studies is like that far away, about 15-minute walk away from me right now. But when I did go, well, first of all, I heard Kakraba Lobi on a recording, and I knew, here's Parliament Funkadelic, here's Earth, Wind and Fire, here's everything that I had imagined. I wrote to the record company, Okora, in London, I believe they're based, and they put me in contact with them. with Kakraba Lobi. And now this is pre-internet. I know I'm ancient. My cane is over here. But it's pre-internet. So I had to write him a letter, and it took about a month of turnaround time. And he said, indeed, yeah, come and study, come and stay here. I will do my best to teach you. Meanwhile, he got a gig in Japan. So my first trip to Ghana, I never met Kakraba.
Oh, wow.
So it afforded me, you know, all dressed up and nowhere to go, right? So I said, all right. So since I can't meet Kakraba, let me go to his area of the country, which is in the upper west of Ghana, which is gyil land, Ghana, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire.
Are you traveling alone? Or with somebody?
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing.
No, I traveled alone. Ghana is, now I don't know how it is post-COVID, but it is probably the one best country to travel by yourself. People are principled, friendly, and kind.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And it's funny because I was on the way to the airport. I was not sniffling. I was sobbing. Like, what am I doing? And my husband's sitting next to me and he says, I'll be on a flight tomorrow if you want. And I said, nah, that's very kind. I have to do this by myself. And there was so much magic in that first journey. And besides the fact that people are very, very kind, I have to say, Ghanaians, salt of the earth.
Talk a little bit about your experience as far as a master's student, or, you know, like going into a culture where they don't believe that just anybody can or should, you know, study an instrument or learn an instrument or be able to, you know, adopt that.
I get you. I was really lucky with Kakraba because Kakraba was an unusual person. He, first of all, Kakraba Lobi was the founding gyil master of the first national dance company of Ghana. So he occupied this iconic space in history and in his community. He loved collaboration and he loved stretching himself. A lot of traditionalists, they like to learn more of their tradition, and that's so amazing and wonderful. But Kakraba, in addition to that, he liked to collaborate with people like Obo Adi or Fode Suso from Mali on the kora. So when I wrote to him, you know, I think his attitude came through. Yeah, let's try something. However, Kakraba had a penchant for not accepting students. If he felt you were a dabbler, he'd say, oh, you study with my cousin, you study with my brother. Fortunately, well, then we met the day before the first lesson, and he says to me, do you want to study like an American, or do you want to study traditionally in the traditional manner? I said, of course. Ah, traditional. He said, his answer was, huh. He said, bring an uncapped bottle of spirits tomorrow. So I brought the bottle, big old bottle of gin. Just an example of how we start. 2 glasses, okay? He was really nice to me. He poured himself like that. He poured me like that. But this is straight alcohol. And he began what's called the calling of the spirits. 1 drop on each corner of the instrument, 1 drop on each mallet. And he raised the glass and he said all of these prayers in the Lobi language. And he said, now you. So he instructed me to do the same thing. And he said, you know, prayers. So I offered up some Buddhist prayers. And then he said, now, you know, like touche, he said, now down. Well, I'm not good with liquor. I'm certainly not good with straight liquor. And I was immediately drunk as a skunk. And he with what's called pire, to call the ancestors. No time frame, no, you know, I had never seen his instrument, didn't know his tuning. You. And I was like, I can't even tell you what I heard, much less repeat it back to you. So after a minute of this, probably literally about 2 or 3 minutes, I said, okay, what am I not getting here? I mean, this seems outrageous. And I offered up a prayer to what's called the ancestors, his ancestors. And I basically said, okay, you guys, I don't know you. I don't know what I'm doing, but I really need your help. I began to play. So uncanny.
Wow.
I said, oh, whoa, this is amazing. And do you know what Kakraba did? And okay, so this started I guess what we would call in America an apprenticeship. If you take on a teacher, number one, you don't take on two. You can take on teachers on different instruments, but you don't take on, it's like a marriage in a sense, or like a father-daughter or grandfather-grandson relationship. So every summer for many years, I went back, and every day, well, sometimes we'd take Sunday off. He wanted to rest, but every other day that I was there, I would show up around 7:30. And when the sun peeked over the roof in the outdoors and you could see the sun, he said, okay, it's going to be too hot. We're done. So it's about 3.5 hour lesson.
So was he teaching anybody else or just you at the time?
At the time, there was a German student and one of his sons. Of course, the son, traditionally, you ask, well, one of the first things I did was to ask children, because they're going to give me an honest and candid answer. How did you learn? How did you learn music? Whether it be singing or playing of an instrument. Oh, I didn't learn. Okay, well, how do you know how to play? One little boy said, God. And I said, yeah, I get it. Yeah, I get that. How did God enable you to learn how to play? It's osmosis. Literally, if you're born into a family, you hear it, you begin to play. Usually when you begin to play, of course, there are things to correct, and your grandfather or you're singing, your auntie or your mom or someone will guide you, kind of in the same way that parents guide their children to speak English. They're English speakers. It's quite magical. And it's what's amazing about it is that how the age of children who can play super amazingly well, the counterpoint and the meta dependence and all that.
It's very, very similar in the New Orleans culture. The early New Orleans, I just remember going and everybody brought instruments to somebody's backyard and the jam session would start, little kids all the way up. Same thing in the church. We have so many great drummers who are coming through the church that's just where they learn, from the time they could remember,
It is so amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the teachers take a very take a high level responsibility for their students. It's not just, I've got a bunch of students and I try to show them, and so they feel responsible for you.
Yes. Kakraba, one year he sent me to his cousin, Sikolo, who was in his village. And he said, you study with my cousin. I said, well, Kakraba, I'm happy studying with you. My cousin tell you things I can't tell you. I said, all right, I'm gone. I was introduced to Say, and the first thing he did was put me on he and I traded what's called P.A.S, which I described to you before, because that's how you greet the ancestry and open up the way. And he brought all the women he could find, because I think the message he wanted to convey is that women do have power. And for me, it was a big embarrassment. I said, oh my God, here's a master and here's me. I did my best. Then our first private lesson, he showed me a piece and then he stayed. And I said, oh, Say, thank you for staying. You don't have to stay. He said, oh no, I must stay. I said, but you just gave me a lesson. He said, I want to make sure you have learned correctly. So literally until I stopped, I said, okay, after an hour or so. And he was just so, as you say, responsible. It's a lineage that I think West African people are very, very, very connected to culture.
Mhm.
It's not just something that people say. And as a stranger, as they call it, as a person from another land coming with a very keen interest in that culture, we all fell in love with each other over and over again. It was
very
really
open,
lovely.
very open too, is in relationships beyond just, people in your community. The community itself is a very open, and especially
Yeah.
in music making itself is almost a vehicle for that communication too, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where like a place like Pasek and the village called Tuna are the same. Like there's just a whole bunch of like-minded people smiling and saying, "Oh, we're together," which really blew my mind. I have to say, of course, negative things happen to all human beings, but the level of positive approach to life that happens in especially rural West Africa, it just blows my mind over and over again. And it's really reflected in the music. So the first time I went was just a musical. I didn't know what I was going to, but then I started going because I made all these friends, and of course, to study, to continue my studies, but to also to nurture those friendships.
You had mentioned how he brought all the women together to see you do this. So that insinuates that was unusual.
Yes, it was. There were never, women were not allowed to play in public.
Wow. And has that changed because of you?
The first festival that I bumped into was in the Upper West of Ghana. Of course, I rode into town with one of the members of the Arts Council. Now, mind you, a country like Ghana has a branch of the government that's devoted to arts. And there are ministers of the Arts Council, local ministers who are stationed everywhere throughout the country. I bumped into one of those people named Anthony Bondong, and he asked me lots of incisive questions, realized that I was a child of serendipity, and said, there's something, you're supposed to be here. So he took me to meet his wife, and she took me under her wing for the weekend. They gave me an instrument. That was the first time I had an instrument. And then they took me to the village called Laura. You're supposed to go straight to the chief, because the chief is supposed to know anything of consequence that happens on a day-to-day basis. Instead, they took me and had me trained by 3 different teachers for 3 days. I liked the numerology that was involved. And then the next day, they took me to the council. So here you have a group of elder gentlemen. They sit in a circle on the chief's roof, and they talk about anything that needs to be talked about. It's so amazingly beautiful because it rids them of like festering problems. If anybody notices a problem, they go to one of the council of elders and they say, hey, this dike is going to break probably soon. Can you tell the chief, and can we get this taken care of? So things are running really smoothly. So I was the subject of that particular evening, and Chief Carbo gave me a scathing interview, very friendly, but scathing. What is your background? Why do you make music? Do you make money when you make music? Are you going to make money when you learn our music? What are you going to do with that money? Are you going to send any of it back to us? Do you make music just because it feeds your ego? I mean, really incisive questions. And when we were done, he said, yes, you can play. Come back tomorrow, bring an instrument, bring an accompanist, and play. So when we returned the following day, I felt like a child, doing your first piano recital. There's the older ones saying, oh, how nice, that's very nice. However, I played three again, three pieces that I'd been taught in the last 3.5 days. And the chief got up. He was wearing special garb that day. He got up and started dancing. And I thought, oh, now he's being so sweet and so nice. I didn't realize chiefs don't dance. They officiate. So the council when they saw him dance, you saw things like expressions like, ooh, what's he saying? And when I finished playing, there was a big debate that ensued in the Dagara language. And what they were debating, because I didn't know the language at that time, there are two principles or two traditions that are at work here, and we have to make a decision. Number one, when a stranger comes, you have, especially to learn about your humanity, you have to aid and abet. Number two, women do not play the gyil. So guys, what are we going to do? And meanwhile, my teacher Baru said, keep quiet. So I just, like you always do, just say, okay, I'm sure I'll learn about all this in the future. Chief Carbo got up. He raised his big robes up and he said, from now on, women will play gyil. And it hit me, those light bulb moments, it hit me in a second, like, holy smoke, you mean women aren't supposed to play this? So these three teachers were teaching me in secret. There's nothing wrong with a woman playing if she is from a or at the time, if she was from a family and she could do it in her house, but to play out in public, no go. So suddenly he reversed this.
It's like hundreds of years old, probably law, right?
Yes, and
That's
of course,
incredible.
when you then I performed in the festival, and of course, people who don't like what you're doing are not going to come up to you and say, although a couple did say, but most people, of course, were coming up and saying, you are freeing our women. You are doing a great thing. And these were people, men and women, were saying this. And I just said, the power of being in the right place. But not only being in the right place, but just following your muse. Because, it took me a long time to say, how committed am I to this? Maybe I'll go next year. Maybe I'll go the following year. I don't want to get sick. Maybe I'll go next year. I don't want to get caught up in any lack of transportation. But when I finally did, overcome my fears and go and follow my muse, I was able to affect change. And that's been a lesson that's spurred me on for the rest of my career. Follow your muse.
Yeah, when you going from there and coming back to New York and starting to play again in trios and different places like that was just, it wasn't by necessity or I have to have a job as much as it was just following what your passion was.
Yes, I've been fortunate with that.
Okay, so after you changed some old tradition, like, a couple hundred years, you just, show up and change the whole culture. After you change the culture of Ghana, how do you go from that unbelievable milestone and then land a gig with Saturday Night Live? Like,
well,
on the other side of the spectrum.
You come back home, you say, well, oh my God. Speaking of Ghana, I wept when I literally wept so many times because it was like, and, I heard this from other people and I said, yeah, that's very romantic. West Africa is the womb of humankind, blah, blah, blah. But really, in terms of the way people interact, I really felt I'd been ripped out of somebody's cradling arms, somehow. But hey, got to make a living and all that. I was gigging. I'll try to make this short because it is an extremely long story. But from the street to 30 Rock 8H. I had decided one day to go down to the Lower East Side, where at the time no one had any money. I said, let me busk down there. Let me take my marimba down there. A car drove by. A woman ran straight out at me and said, my name is Consuelo. We need a marimba player. Give me your card. Here's my card. She ran back. I guess she was late to something. That put me in touch with the Latin American Workshop, which is a Latin based cultural workshop space and place run by the wonderful Argentine composer named Bernardo Palombo. So I joined the house band eventually. You're in the house band, and there's a guest artist from Argentina, Peru, Uruguay, Mexico. We would play for them. If they had $1,000 a piece in the budget, we'd smile and we'd play. If they had zero in the budget, we'd smile and we'd play. Chico da Costa was from Uruguay. He had no money. We're like, let's do it. Let's do this. And we had this beautiful concert. He was an amazing artist. And Philip Glass was the person who brought him. So Philip was in the audience. About 2 days later, I got a call from Donwagen, his company. They said, Philip's about to record Powakatsi. We would like you to come into the studio. Basically, I was there for 8 minutes. They needed to know that I could read that I could do a click track, and that I could read. You can read. Roger Squatiro, who is an amazing and wonderful percussionist, was the other person on that gig. And Roger was gigging with Lenny. Lenny had an art band called the Borneo Horns. So then Lenny was looking for someone to play 4-mallet xylophone, if you could imagine such a timbre, rock hard mallets, funk. So I was playing with Lenny for quite a while, and I had to sub the gig out to the amazing, fabulous Bill Ware, who, I can't say enough about Bill Ware. He's amazing. So of course I said, I sub myself out. No more Borneo horns for me. And the next time that I heard from Lenny was on my answering machine, and it kind of went like this. Hi, Valerie, I hope that you're in town. Barry, if you get this message and Valerie's out of town, please call me and let me know. We have been struggling all summer long to get you into the Saturday Night Live band. And finally, yesterday, we broke through. Please get back to me immediately. So meanwhile, a little story. I had just been fired from David Byrne's band, like about 4 or 5, 6 months before. And I was like, oh, poor me. I think everyone has that kind of time in their career where they say, oh, I really messed up and my career's over.
Some of us have it a few times.
So of course, all of my Buddhist friends said, no, you're not going about this the right way. Opportunity, dry up your tears, stop being a baby, and look to the future, look to what this is going to teach you. And, finally, when I got it through the skull, that I was exactly in the right place. I was walking, at the time I lived in a tenement building. I was walking from the 3rd floor where we lived to the 1st floor where the studio was. And in the stairwell, I just kind of stopped and said, you know what? I'm okay. There's a place for me somewhere. And that was the day before I got that call. So, it's inner reflects the outer. If your inner is all woo, then the outer can be that way too. But once I said, I'm going to stand up, I'm okay, I'm going to gig in the future, then that response came, and of course it came via the most incredible. Lenny is one of my favorite musicians of all time, and just a wonderful person.
Yeah. And just, that level of opportunity that came knocking at that time, it wasn't, well, I guess I'll play on the street for a while longer, or,
No, it was during a crisis. Actually, it's funny because and David called me himself, David Byrne, and he said, I'm just so sorry. I'm going to switch producers. It's just not going to work out. We're going to go for a different sound. And he was very kind, and I really admire David, and I had a wonderful time working with him. I got a call to go to South Africa to play with a singer named Julie Dumakude, and then I freelanced, and then my husband joined me and we freelanced together. People who play American standards are like lumps of gold in Johannesburg. So we were doing a lot of things. And for me, it was like, okay, I can just escape that bad situation. But you know what, come November, I went back to New York, and, it's like my karma was right there staring at me again. And then I had to say, I need to stand up. I need to stand up. And, I think before, being Native American, when we're not careful, we start to do this thing like, oh, he dissed me. He doesn't like my skin. He doesn't like this, that, the other. Hey, we're all human beings. We all have capacity. We all need to take care of each other and stop, at least my mom used to say, just stop playing that card. Just do your best, and if someone disparages you, send them love, because they're probably suffering, and just walk down the road. Don't get caught up in
That's
that
awesome.
stuff. Yeah, I have a good mom. My mom was my heroine. She always had the right thing to say.
So how many years ago was that?
SNL?
Yeah.
26 and a half.
26 and a half year kick. Oh my gosh. That
I
was
know.
incredible.
I can't believe it's been that long. It feels like 7 years ago.
Was Sean the drummer at the time, right?
Sean had been there, I think it might have been his third year, the beginning of his third year.
Wow, so you guys have been together for that one. That is
yeah,
incredible.
and I was petrified to meet Sean Pelton. I was like, this is Mr. Groove. It's like, hello. And he's
so
like,
great.
no, but he's, one of my favorite musicians of all time. And everybody in the band is just so, not only an iconic musician, but just really good people. And we have a wonderful time getting through all the crazy things that happen to us and making music.
Well, you have the best job because you have a little escape hatch whenever you don't have to be on camera all the time.
It's true. Or I can just kind of duck between, right in the middle of my setup is a pillar.
Yeah,
I've seen that before.
Which holds the building up. So that's for me, that is, when I saw that, I said, that's not nice. But then I thought of the Chinese art of feng shui. I said, pillars in my space, I'll take it. But it's wonderful because everybody on the show, from the props to the hair and makeup to wardrobe design, everybody is just trying to beat the clock. And a lot of really creative risks are taken up to the very moment that we go on. I just learned about a year ago, because I befriended one of the wonderful digital short editors, Raphael from France. And he told me that sometimes he is editing the sound on a digital short within 2 minutes before it goes on the air.
Wow, that's incredible.
I'm like, oh man, is that pressure or what?
Yeah, it's live even when it's not live.
Yeah, and the kind of pressure we're under, it usually revolves around the monologue. Because if the monologue, for some reason, between dress and air, dress is the big, like, okay, did it work or did it not? If between dress and air, someone determines that that song that we back, if it's a singer, if it's a singing host, if it didn't go well, we are in our inner ear monitors hearing during the cold opening, okay, we're going to cut bars 25 through 32. So jump from 24 to 33. Valerie, take that cymbal roll off and replace it with a chime tree. James, instead of a gliss on the bass, I want you to do this, that. We're getting all of our instructions, no rehearsal whatsoever. And boom, we're on.
Nice. Yep.
Did you and Sean at the very beginning of the tenure, or maybe even sometimes before a gig, do you get together and discuss how to work with each other, or it just you guys just fell right in, no problem?
A lot of times I try to take my cues from him. He's the drummer, and that's my role. It's a jazz and pop situation. So, a lot of times he'll say, why don't you play bell on this? Or he'll say, hey, let me play bell on this. And if you could play bongo conga combination, so those kind of things pass between us, on the set. But literally it's a very transparent situation. Up until 2 years ago, people used to come and visit us. The NYU jazz studies, blah, blah, blah. And there's 20 students staring up at you. Or someone's auntie or some producer from somewhere. So there's always seemed to be someone sitting in on our rehearsal whom you really wanted to sound good for. And I send big kudos to Earl Gardner, because it's 11 o'clock in the morning. I suppose he warmed up at home, he's a trumpet player, but hitting those high notes at 11 o'clock in the morning and nailing them, or playing shekere. Alex Foster loves shekere, and he loves that moto perpetuo, dun ticka dun ticka dun ticka dun for 5 minutes, dun ticka dun ticka dun, and saying, I wish I'd have warmed up my arms, done a few push-ups, done a few chin-ups, It's a very transparent rehearsal, but it's almost like we can read each other's thoughts at this point.
Yeah. How is it? How can someone sub in for you?
Yeah, right.
How often are you not there? I know Sean is very famous for never missing a show. We're only missing one out of
7 years.
I think I might have missed. Well, I from PASIC, I didn't catch my flight because they delayed because of weather, and they delayed about 5 times.
We could have done it. We could have done the interview at the airport if I'd known you were going to be sitting there all day.
I missed one because of that. I missed one because the University of Delaware had a women masters of percussion thing, and he couldn't change the date. And I said, there's a lot to learn from this. And so I did that. And the third one was with the Symphony Orchestra, and also, 120-piece orchestra, you can't really change everybody's schedule. But I have not subbed out very often. My sub is amazing. But a percussionist, John Hadfield is my sub, an amazing percussionist. The approach is no one percussionist plays like another one. Everybody brings a different thing to the table. So Lenny's very generous, except for mallet instruments. If you've got a written chart, you gotta nail that chart.
Right.
But in terms of choice of instruments, choice of things to do, Lenny calls me the wild card, because the only instructions he does have very specific instructions for particular things. And if you're playing Latin, Steve Toure writes a lot of mambo. So of course I'm going to play tumbao. But, and you take cues from the genres of music, but I have a lot of choices. And so we just hand that whole idea with the same rig, same setup over to John, and he handles it the way he would handle it. Fortunately for me, it's been, he's been excellent, really amazing.
So that's just your day gig. You also teach. You also still play Lion King.
That's the night gig.
That's the night gig.
That's the night gig. And it's
side hustle.
It's kind of like that. And the way I got into Lion King was through Julie Taymor, and I don't know if you know anything about her. She's very left of center. So when she told me she was taking on The Lion King, I said, nah, you're not going to do that. She said, yeah, I'm going to do it. Lion King and SNL are they're like being on two different poles of the same planet. SNL is about spontaneity, reading someone else's mind, reaching for something that you're not quite sure of, and making that happen, and handling emergencies. Lion King is about understanding what you've crafted through arrangement. And I arranged, actually, I was really fortunate to arrange the percussion books for the show.
Oh, wow.
So for me, it's like, now is to recreate and to put the same passion that happened when I first created it, and the same kind of commitment. And, that sounds pretty easy. It's not that easy for me. A lot of times I was like, oh, I wonder what this would sound like. And, the first couple of years, it was like back and forth with me and the music director, or, because he'd say, that sounded nice. You can't keep doing that.
You're done creating.
Just yeah, repeat. You've written it already. just play it. So it's really two different disciplines, and they're both, disciplines that I think, I like very much. Teaching, I've always loved. I've always had good teachers. My first grade teacher was my heroine, because she taught me how to spell the word photosynthesis when I was 5 years old. So my teaching at NYU is, it's like a grand experiment for me. Because if I can take the principles that I have been taught by in West Africa and pass those on, then I know that there are other ways to teach than the Western pedagogical format.
Yeah, and that's probably a whole nother discussion, because there is so much difference, and how much you internalize as a musician, how how it feels to play, and when you even talk about dance as it relates to playing percussion and all
and
that
we do
too.
Dance, and we do sing. And the worst thing is when you encounter the lack of confidence of somebody who doesn't keep consistent pitch, or at first doesn't understand the right from the left. So that's for me, it's just nothing but joy. It's just so much fun. I'm really blessed, and I get paid to do this.
Well, thank you so much for taking time with us.
It's an honor and a pleasure that I never would have expected. And I really want to thank both of you and everybody at the Zildjian and Vic Firth family. It really feels like a family to me. And it's really an honor to be playing with you and with the instruments and as part of our group of people.
The honor is ours, trust me.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Take care.
Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you so much.